Crime and Punishment. Easily the longest book that we'll be reading this year, but also one of the most beautiful depictions of grace that we'll also be reading this year. This book doesn't shy away from the darkness, and as I'll be explaining later on in the video, Dostoevsky was very familiar with this darkness. But neither does it shine away from the power of grace. And so that's one of the reasons for why Crime and Punishment is one of my favorite novels. Now, before I continue going on with this video introduction, I need to give a spoiler alert. There's a major event that happens at the end of part 1 that basically sets up the whole premise of the book. So I'm going to be talking about that event a fair bit. Because of this, my recommendation would be that you guys read part 1 first, so that the big event doesn't get spoiled, and then you come and watch the rest of this video introduction. If you want to just go ahead and watch this video first, that's fine, but just be forewarned, there are spoilers for the first part of the story. That being said, let's briefly look at Dostoevsky's life. Now, Fyodor Dostoevsky lived a hard life, and that dramatically impacted his writings. He initially went to college as an engineer. However, he soon began translating books on the side for cash, and then ended up writing his own book at the age of 25. Soon after the publication of his first book, however, he was arrested for his involvement with a utopian liberal society that really was more of a book club, but anyways, he got arrested for that and almost ended up being killed by a firing squad before at just the last moment the Tsar sent his men freeing him from the firing squad just to send him to 10 years of prison sentence of hard labor in Siberia. This near-death experience and time in Siberia greatly shaped Dostoevsky as a person. After leaving Siberia, Dostoevsky was constantly in need of money, and that ended up spurring on a lot of his writing in order to get the cash. Many of his books achieved commercial success, but Dostoevsky was prone to gamble a lot of it away. Throughout his life, he struggled with epilepsy and mania, and was generally an irritable person to get along with in life. However, he was supported by a wife who loved him despite many of his personal problems. Dostoevsky would go on to die at the age of 60, having won for himself a lot of praise and critical acclaim. So as you can see from Dostoevsky's life, Dostoevsky had a lot of deep personal issues, and these struggles play out in various ways in his different works. Dostoevsky's works explore the complexities of human psychology like few other works have done, and this can be seen, for example, in Crime and Punishment, where the story focuses on the psychology of an axe murderer. When Dostoevsky first started planning this novel, he wrote to his publisher that he intended to be the psychological account of a crime that was committed by a young man who, quote, had submitted to certain strange, incomplete ideas which flowed on the wind, end quote. And that the novel would explore the idea, quote, that the legal punishment inflicted for a crime intimidates a criminal infinitely less than the lawmakers think, partly because he himself morally demands it, end quote. So what does all this mean? I think that this primarily means two things for the reader. First, when you're reading the novel, you want to pay attention to Raskolnikov's reasoning for why he ends up killing the old woman. Dostoevsky does show some of the reason before he does the deed, but he holds back on showing the majority of Raskolnikov's reasoning until well after the murder is committed. So you want to pay attention to the psychology of Raskolnikov in terms of the murder. The second thing you want to look at in terms of Raskolnikov's personality is how much the morality of his actions weigh on his conscience. Dostoevsky believed that the criminals didn't fear legal punishment as much as they could because they knew that they morally deserve it. And so you want to watch out for how this plays out in the book. Finally, one last thing that you want to pay attention to in this book is the different foil characters that are present. Now, if you'll remember our previous discussions of foil characters, you'll know that there are characters who are presented as characters who are similar to the main character, but who have major flaws that distinguish them from the main character. So there are a lot of different foil characters in this book who each represent different paths that Raskolnikov can choose to take after committing the murder. So watch out for the different foil characters in this book and consider how each of them represents a different type of person that Raskolnikov could become if he so desires. And there are the three things I think you should look out for while reading Crime and Punishment. Dostoevsky is very familiar with the fallenness of man, and so because of that, the book is quite dark and can be difficult to get through at times. Dostoevsky lived a difficult life, and a lot of that is reflected in Raskolnikov's life. However, what you'll also see is that while Dostoevsky had a very acute understanding of man's brokenness, he also has a very acute understanding of God's grace. And this is why, despite the brokenness in the world of Crime and Punishment, there is also hope. Because as fallen as man can be, God's grace far exceeds it. And that's what makes Crime and Punishment a worthy addition to the ranks of the classics.